Now I'm going to show you a trail. We're going to go look at that next, where you should plant a food plot on that trail. And I think by the time we get to that trail and we discuss a few items right here in this location, it'll make sense why we're planting that trail and why we are not planting this trail, and why, in most cases, the short answer to if you should plant your logging trails on your property is no. It's a quick no. And I'll talk about that why. Now, first off, most logging trails are back here in the shade. Doesn't matter if it's shade tolerant or not, it's not going to offer enough volume for deer or any type of an attraction if you're planting some type of shade-proof food plot. In fact, they're just sucking your money if it says shade-proof on the bag or it's meant for shady soils. Yeah, we can get rye to grow in here during the fall. There's various types of grass seed that are more shade tolerant, for lawns, not attraction for food or wildlife. There's clovers that are somewhat attractive to shade, but you can see in here, even in a location like this right here, we have various forms of white clover growing here, and we mow this. We mowed it last year. We did not plant this, but it's very sparse. And you can see down here, very sparse right here. This is not going to offer any appreciable value to the deer or any other kind of wildlife. And you can imagine every bite that's taken here is not replaced. And so it doesn't matter what kind of clover we have here. Fawn?
Chipmunk.
Oh, chipmunk. We've already seen one fawn today, so we just both heard movement over there, and now we're wired to find fawns. We probably won't find them, but I'd walked right by it within a foot twice, and Dylan pointed it out. So my old eyes, I guess, aren't worth as much as they used to be. But for shade reasons, you're not going to get enough volume, so planting a food plot on a logging trail is not a good idea. Most importantly, if you're planting food on this logging trail, and we need to access this logging trail right here to get to a mock scrape that we have right back here in a camera location, to get to a stand location that we have right up here. Stand location, you can see right in the hole. In fact, from right here, where it's about a 28-yard shot, 26, something like that. If we're walking right through this food, if it was any form of attraction, then we're leaving our scent, and we have the ability to spook deer every time we come into this location and out. Because let's face it, if you're planting food on a logging trail and it's appreciable, it's a food plot. And the thought is, let's turn all our logging trails. Boy, I've even seen recommendations for that on various plans. After I go, someone's had someone, I come out afterwards and they say, really, should we plant these logging trails? And they're saying, well, we can get 2.5 miles of food. And if you add it up, we could add another 3/4 of an acre of food, maybe 1.25 acres, maybe a 1/2 acre, and that's going to help the deer herd. But it's not, because it's probably not going to be appreciable. And then number two, if it is appreciable, then you're walking on these trails and need to access those trails to get to your stands. So you're inviting deer to your access route. It's one of the most silly things you can even think of, where you're actually saying, I'm going to walk on this trail to get to stand A, and I'm going to walk over this food on the way there to get to stand A, with the potential to spook deer when I get into the stand, when I get out of the stand, when I'm walking to the stand. Not smart. It also spreads your food out everywhere around the property. So that's number three. That's the third reason not to plant your logging trails. Deer, in theory, if that food was attractive, they can step out at any point of their bedding area and hit food. I heard of a deer manager down in Texas many years ago, where he contacted another deer manager and kind of like, we have all this food. We have 20% of the land planted in food. We have food plots everywhere. There's tons of deer. There's lots of big bucks, but my clients aren't killing those deer on the property and those bucks. And the shorter answer was, get rid of the majority of those food plots, have them more centralized, have small hunting plots on the way to those big food plots. Because there was food everywhere, bucks didn't have to necessarily go in front of a tree stand. And when you create food everywhere on the property, like in the case of logging trails that stretch all over your land, then you're creating a situation where deer can step out at any point from any bedding area and eat till dark and not move your tree stand. You're actually, instead of using food to define movement, you're using food to create random movements, which means you're going to have a hard time hunting. So you're taking a property, you're adding food, and you're making it worse. You're making it worse because you're going to attract deer to your access. The food that you're planting is probably not going to be attractive or experience any volume in the first place. And then you're creating random movements all over your property that create opportunities for deer to never walk by a tree stand, that buck that you're after. So it diminishes the value of your hunt and makes it very difficult to actually target deer and create a quality deer herd because of the food that is on those logging trails. And let's face it, even if you put it on the logging trails, it's not attractive, it doesn't grow, you're at least wasting time and money at that. So think about planting your logging trails. I'd consider it for a second, and it would only be a consideration if there was enough room to plant food on this logging trail. Let's say it's 12 feet wide. Let's say there's sun hitting this, especially from the southerly sky in the middle of the day where I can get really good hot sun right down the middle of this plot. That might mean that I have to open quite a bit of this canopy so I can get the sunlight into here, so I have to cut down some trees. But I can never use this trail right here to walk into that stand location. I'd have to come in from the bottom, walk up this hill, get to this stand, and then I'm watching this logging trail going in front of me back and forth, and you're hunting it like a long, narrow food plot. That works, but you have to have the sunlight, you have to have the space, and you have to have access to the stand the opposite direction from this logging trail, and that works great. There's a lot of times when I'm looking at a client property, there's portions of a logging trail, 200-yard stretch, 100-yard stretch, maybe a logging trail that goes through more of a swamp or lowland area, so there's limited amount of trees and canopy. You're putting that food plot in, and we're gonna go over and look at a spot where I'm creating a trail to connect the features. We'll talk about what we're planting in that trail, why, and how we plan to use it, and how we plan to set the deer up this fall, because we're using that trail to actually define movement. We don't have to walk through that trail. We're coming to that from the opposite direction. The opposite direction is screened, so we can actually get into a deer blind and hunt this. You'll see how we're putting it all together. That's the next stop. Let's take you over there, and I hope this makes sense and helps redefine your thoughts about planting logging trails, because it's a common practice that can be very bad for you and your ability to create a quality deer herd and to be the herd influencer. Let's go check out this other spot. Now, this is an example of a trail that we should be planting. It's a connection and a definition of deer movement. The opposite of just randomly planting all your trails and evenly distributing your deer all around the property, never knowing where they're going to come out or in or what stand they're going to. This trail that we're making right now, you can obviously see it's dead, dying. We'll spray it a couple more times. I will not work this up in any way, but this is connecting our long food plot right here. We have a big bank of switchgrass planted behind me that's actually coming in right now that will be able to carve this deer trail, this trail right here, right out into the food plot and define the movement. But we're adding some more pieces to this movement too. You know, this will end up a clover trail. Not something I want to replant every year. We can easily mow it here, just like our other trails, but the other trails inside the woods we're mowing just to keep the vegetation down and make it so we can actually maintain those trails and keep them going for the long term. So I'll plant clover here, and I'll do that probably with a brassica crop. I could use oats. They die out over the wintertime. I could even use rye. Put that over this, and then either kill the rye out with clethodim, a grass-specific herbicide, or mow it in the spring. But bottom line is, whether I use brassicas here, I use oats, or I use rye, even peas, beans, whatever I want to plant in here this year, I can mix in with my clover blend. We'll get John Comp's clover mix from Northwoods Whitetails. And next year, after this crop dies, I mow it or kill it, we'll be left with pure clover. Gets full sun. It's really exposed to the sun, so I don't have to worry about shading. And this is always going to be that early successional growth. We're going to have a big bank of switchgrass here. Along the power lines right here, we have an acre of switchgrass planted. This right here, there'll be switchgrass in here growing. Right here we have a water hole. This water hole will be installed in this location. Perfect spot for it. It's semi-shaded, back tucked in here. But then we have this trail moving right through. We've already sprayed this right here too, just today. And that'll go out into that switchgrass bank. Might even put a small little hunting plot there, but it's not too much of a concern. I could put a hunting plot out there if I want or not. But bottom line is we have bedding in that area. We now own the land to the north. So instead of sticking a stand back here and hunting as if it's the end of our property, it's in the middle of the property. This is the middle of movement. I don't want to get past this improvement and spook deer. Now we can actually create bedding there We have switchgrass alongside it to protect ourselves getting in and out so we don't spook the deer, make it so the deer can't see us. And this would be the perfect little trail that we can plant. It'll end up only about 40 yards long, goes right by this water hole here. And you can bet we'll look for a trail coming in and out of here, or one of these overhanging branches. Even right here, we can tack a branch to this aspen right here and put a mock scrape right here. Bottom line, we can get a camera back there. It'll look over the water hole, mock scrape, and it'll tell us exactly what's going on in front of this redneck right here. With the switchgrass, the cover we have in the food plot, this edge cover, this being carved out, the goldenrod will be about this high. We'll add switchgrass into this location too. When those deer look back up there in the fall, they're going to see the redneck above the grass, but it's going to blend into that top and these shrubs. We never had deer, any kind of problem with deer looking at this redneck here. We're going to create this travel corridor through here. We'll have cover between here and the redneck. This will be a great shot to the water hole, great shot to the mock scrape. And the beauty is we can walk behind all that cover on the back side and not expose ourselves to this little movement, this little trail that we should plant, the food plot. This is where I shot Blade at 250 some yards down the food plot. We can get in and out of this stand without spooking deer. We can watch this little movement. We'll keep tabs on it with the trail camera, water hole in that location, mock scrape. Again, we can plant this trail full sun. We'll get full growth. It's a connection of deer habitat improvements. It's a line of movement we expect to hunt. We can get in and out of the stand nearby without spooking deer on this because we don't have to walk through it, leave our scent, or ever spook deer. We can get in and out. We're establishing, like Dylan just reminded me, we're establishing a pattern of use here during the summertime. We'll get the mock scrape here. That's the first step. We've already sprayed it out. That'll create this trail. We'll plant it to enhance this trail. We'll use clover because we don't care if it's down in the dirt. We just want it to hold soil. The clover can grow during the summertime, and it's just this little strip right here and establish that pattern of use. And we'll keep tabs on it. And this is the opposite of a shaded 2-track in the woods logging trail that often is recommended to plant when it's not going to be appreciable in value. It's not going to grow anything. You're setting yourself up by inviting deer to your access right to your feet. You spook them on the way into a stand, on the way out, while you're walking on the trail. And people will say, well, we need to plant some ground cover so it doesn't matter. Get some shade tolerant grass, a grass mixture. We've used that with some of the shade tolerant clovers just to get something that'll fill that space. But a lot of times there's not enough sunlight for those plants to actually absorb the nutrients that are in the soil, even if it's quality soil, and you lack any kind of appreciable growth in there. Really, shade tolerant grass for your lawn is probably the best thing. Maybe even a road mix. I know they have a Wisconsin highway mix. We used to buy that in Michigan and it was a Wisconsin highway mix, but something that will grow just about anywhere. It's not going to be a food value, but it's going to hold your trails together. It's going to make sure we still mow our trails like we do and keep them down. I don't mind having some ground cover on there, but I'm not going to fool myself or fool you and recommend something that might sound good on paper in planting all your logging trails and getting you an extra 1.1 acres of food, but really hindering your ability to not only offer a food source that defines movement, but hinder your ability to create a quality herd and to be the true herd influencer in the area. This is an example of a trail you want to plant, establish that pattern of use on, as Dylan brought up and reminded me. And where we were previously is definitely an example of a trail you don't want to plant, and I want you to bring those back to your own properties. I hope that helps you. You need to have food where you can define movement, where it relates to bedding, where it relates to a deer line of movement that you can actually hunt, and you'll be on track this fall for actually planting food where you need it the most and your deer need it the most for not only your hunt, but to create a quality herd this fall. I'm excited to tell you guys about my latest web class. It's how to plant food plots, how to design your food plot program, and it covers everything. And really, there's 30 videos, over 10 hours, 11 hours of footage, workbook, hats, all that stuff. On top of it, I urge you to check out the link. But I cover 5 main areas: critical food plot concepts, where to plant, how to create, what to plant, and finally how to plant. It takes you through that step by step so you can make your own decisions that apply to you and build a great high quality food plot program this year, whether you have decades of experience or no experience at all.